Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another Supatease video. And 10.1.5 is coming out on Tuesday, and it is having a massive slew of changes to almost every single specialization in the game when it comes to PvP. So it's really important to stay up to date with what's going on and changing so that you're ready for the competition when the patch goes live, so you can plan which specializations are going to be most interesting to you to pick up, or which ones may end up being the most competitive. In today's video, I'm going to be constructing a tier list to predict which specializations will end up being strong with the information that we currently have in the patch notes. So let's get started. We got a lot of specializations to talk about. Affliction Warlocks, they're receiving a lot of buffs towards their unstable affliction. Likely, some sort of single target build could possibly be more competitive for them. Now, unfortunately, you're not getting any additional crowd control, which is the main thing I think that hinders affliction, is that its lack of finishing power and its lack of holding a target down with crowd control, because it doesn't have any to do that with. It's probably going to be really gnarly in solo shuffle, but in ranked threes, not so much. So in overall ranking, I think for affliction, it's likely going to feel kind of mid-ground. I do think you'll feel strong in solo shuffle, but still lack finishing power, which is maybe going to hold you down even in solo shuffle to some extent. But you can get some really good lobbies and some good matchups, especially caster cleave mirrors. But with how good some other DPS are, affliction might start to fall off a tad bit. Now, Arcane, unfortunately, we're seeing a big readjustment for mages away from cooldowns. Arcane Surge is getting nerfed, instant Arcane Blasts are getting nerfed, and hopefully that's compensated enough for your sustain damage. But the main problem is that your sustain damage is hard casted. So if you're getting interrupted a lot and locked down, I think you're going to feel your damage actually weaker than it was previously. Not to mention that the other specializations of mage are getting your cool toys like mass invisibility and things like that. So and extra mobility towards those other specializations. So honestly, you're kind of losing flavor, and your damage would need to be in a really significant position to be really powerful. So I'm expecting Arcane to feel kind of mid. Again, given the tuning, it might be a little bit better than this, but my expectations and predictions for it are going to be kind of mid. Arms Warrior, this specialization I think is just still pretty well rounded. You might have some frustrating lobbies in solo shuffle, getting kited by wizards and such, and honestly, Frost Mage could be a lot better in this patch, and if Frost Mage is better, you're going to suffer. But we're also anticipating Death Knights to be good, and if Death Knights are good, then Arms Warriors are really good. So my expectation is that Arms Warrior will either slot really nicely with Death Knights or slot really nicely against them. But I do think defensively, you're probably still lacking compared to some specializations that would otherwise jump you up to the S tier. Assassination Rogue, I don't think this spec is going to be around very much. I'm honestly pretty tempted to put it down at D tier. I think that it's sustained damage, it's lower than subtlety currently, and it's not really getting a lot. And the survivability is worse. I actually almost wonder if Assassination may be the worst spec of the patch. It might be pretty close. Maybe it's not completely unplayable, right? Like, this is me comparing it to the best specializations in the game. It's not completely unplayable, but even compared to the best specializations, there's still a gap. S to C, there's still a gap. I think that it's, pretty comp dependent. If you're not playing with a mage, you're probably going to struggle, and you should probably just be even almost any other spec of rogue other than Assassination, I think, for this patch. Augmentation Evoker. Now, this is the new specialization, all right? This one, with how it's tuned currently, is an absolute monster, like maybe the best spec in the game. Also probably means it's highly likely to get nerfed pretty quickly. And it seems like nerfs come through within like the first week of a new patch, so you really don't want to be the absolute best on the first week of a patch, but the numbers on it are crazy. It's basically a more fleshed out Devastation Evoker with more tools and utility to support your teammates. And with how they've tuned it for PvP, is that your damage is going to feel more impactful than it does in PvE, where it's more about buffing your allies. In PvP, your throughput is just going to be a lot better. So my initial prediction is that this specialization could be really strong. I think it's going to have a particular niche against double melee DPS, given the fact that stacking multiple members up for Breath of Eons and stunning multiple targets and adding those temporal wounds and exploding them on stacked targets. Like, you're going to ideally want to have targets that are stacked together. Death Knights, if they're good, if melee cleaves are good, then augmentation could end up in a really good spot. So I'm taking a bit of a gamble here, throwing this up onto S tier. If it does end up being S tier, I think it's going to also be the most likely to get nerfed. The only thing that I think also that maybe could hold it back is defensive. It's got the same defensive weaknesses, in my opinion, as Devastation or Preservation, which is getting killed in a stun, and I don't think Subtlety Rogues are going anywhere. So do take that into account. But if it's a melee meta, man, I think this spec is going to be really good. Really good. Beast Mastery Hunter, still just pumping out really good numbers, still kind of weak on the defensive side. I don't see any real like significant changes for you. You're probably still just kind of a solid pick, well-rounded pick. Yeah, defensively, again, is the thing that's keeping you from going up to the S tier, but your damage is still going to be really high. Demonology, now they're doing a lot of changes for Demonology. I have the patch notes here as well if we want to take like a direct look at it, because Demonology is actually getting a lot of stuff, and it can be really tough. Like, I mean, look at all these patch changes. This is why it's really important to check out this video, and we make sure that we're covering like everything, because Demo, they kind of slip some stuff into the wings here for Demonology. So the developer's notes, we're working to reduce the peaks and valleys of Demonology's throughput by depowering Call Dreadstalkers. This will allow us to compensate by increasing the throughput of Demonology's other rotational spells. Lastly, the demonic core economy has been too generous. In Dragonflight, we want to return Demonology to a place where Shadow Bolt is frequently cast, Demon Bolt damage feels impactful, and the number of instant casts available is a bit more limited. So all of those things sound really bad for PvP. All of those sound really bad. We want to limit your instant casts. We want to reduce your burst. Those, you know, if other classes have instant burst, they're in a better position than you are. But then when you read the actual changes, it seems maybe not that bad. Your Felguard's going to get 10% crit chance. Your Felguard's going to get crit damage increased by 20%, which is really good for your pet. Your primary Legion Strike damage increased by 10%. Your primary Felguard Fellstorm increased by 5%. Now, maybe these are nerfs from these existing talents. If you're Demon Lock Warlock player, you can let me know in the comments down below. But a lot of pet damage increases to Hannah Gul'dan damage. Overall, just like damage increases. Hannah Gul'dan damage increased by 25%. Dreadstalker damage increased by 25%. Demon Bolt damage increased by 20%. So like, maybe if you free cast, you're going to be really threatening, but that might be putting you more into the kind of like the MM Hunter camp, you know, like where you're casted burst. So my guess for Demo is it's probably still S tier, even despite all of this, just because you have so much lockdown, every single diminishing return. I think it's probably still going to be S tier. It's just kind of like a shift of where your damage is coming from. Maybe it's not going to be as bursty, but I think your overall kit is still one that is solid for the S tier. Destruction Warlock. Now, this is also a class that is getting some nice buffs. You're getting a Dimensional Rift buff by 15%, and you're getting a redesigned talent. So your Summon Infernal will increase the damage of your next 8 Chaos Bolts by 10%. Imagine if it was 50. Or your next 8 Rain of Fires. I think you're probably going to use this on Chaos Bolt. So Chaos Bolt damage buffs potentially, and mostly the Rift. Now, defensively, I think you've fallen off to Demonology, even with the Soul Link nerfs to them in this most recent patch. I think defensively is where you're kind of struggling at the moment, but I think it's probably still going to be an A. I think these Rifts are going to absolutely rock people's world and do monstrous amounts of damage. Now, Devastation Evoker, I basically think you're an underdeveloped Augmentation Evoker, depending on where the damage ends up, but initially I think you're going to be feeling inferior. The only advantage you have is that you've got this big one-shot damage, whereas Augmentation brings a whole slew of extra utility, portals for their allies, Thorns effects with Blistering Scales, and Absorb effects, and better mechanics to heal their team, and Dream Projection to dispel crowd control. Like, I feel like you're just a really underdeveloped Augmentation Evoker, and honestly, that would be my main criticism towards the class. And one of the things that they brought up when they designed Demon Hunter is that they didn't want one of the specs to feel like that, and honestly, I think Devastation is going to end up falling into that camp. Now, you're probably still going to be able to one-shot, but defensively you're weak. You're lacking so much utility that it's like, if you're a Devastation Evoker, you're probably going to be re-rolling Augmentation, at least in the first week. And I'll be updating this tier list as time goes on, so we're always kind of like keeping track of everything. This is a prediction. I'm expecting at least a little bit of this to be wrong, but I would say that Devastation Evokers are probably going to be re-rolling Augmentation. Disc Priests, you're getting some buffs to your Atonement Healing. I believe you're also getting some buffs to your damage when we scroll down to the PvP specific changes. I just want to make sure I'm not incorrect on this. But I do expect you to be getting buffs. Yep. Atonement Healing, 19%. You're getting double Purify Charge that will also apply a shield when you remove dots, which could be really good for these Affliction Warlocks and Shadow Priest, the Phase Shift, Fade, Dispel, and with Atonement Healing buffs. I think mana is still likely going to be a problem for you, though. So because of that, where do I think that you should go? I want to say A, but you're probably going to feel more like B. We'll leave you on A and maybe readjust this at the end, but I kind of feel like Disc Priest is probably B. Ellie Shaman, damage is still going to be really high, but they're targeting your healing a lot. They're going to be nerfing your guidance healing, by reducing its overall amount. I think they're capping the throughput on it, and they're nerfing hybrid healing a lot in general, which I think could hurt you. I think defensively you're in a similar boat to BM and ARMS in terms of survivability, and with those nerfs coming to you, you're probably going to feel more like A tier, maybe not so much S, but still a decently well-rounded spec. Although, taking into account when melee cleave is meta and if Death Knights are good, it's generally maybe not that great to be an LA Shaman. You get run down a lot, so maybe take that into consideration. But my expectation is you probably feel pretty similar, maybe slightly weaker than you currently are. Enhancement Shaman, you get a lot of buffs for PvE, but those buffs are not transferring over to PvP. And with the way that they're changing mana, it's possible that you'll run out of mana, maybe not as fast. Maybe actually the least affected hybrid, because you're actually maybe one of the only hybrids that could before. You still have the Doomwinds one-shot. As far as I understand, the Doomwinds one-shot is not being touched at all. I think Enhancement Shaman may be one of the most underrated specs in the game. And it could be really beastly at killing these Death Knights. So I'm pretty tempted to throw Enhancement Shaman up here with the Arms Warriors on the A tier in terms of overall efficacy. That's a word, I hope. Feral Druid, you're getting a 5% damage buff. You're getting some Ferocious Bite damage buff. You're getting some single target talents, which is honestly what you need. Your single target's really lacking. You got a lot of pad AoE. You're honestly going to be a monster if it's a DK meta. Survivability still kind of on the lower end. Depending on how Predatory Swiftness affects your healing for regrowth, because I'm not sure if they made it free or not. Let's just scroll up quickly and look at Feral Druid, because the fact that they made mana costs, and basically you have a lot of mana, but as soon as you spend it, it doesn't regen. But Feral wasn't using mana. You had free costed regrowth, so you might actually be one of the best hybrids because of that. If all the other hybrids are running out of mana and you're not. So just want to kind of scroll through that and make sure that isn't the case, because that would be massive, right? Maximum mana increased. Regrowth now costs 10%, down from 25. Now, does that take into account with Predatory Swiftness? My expectations for Feral is that it'll probably be, maybe A, maybe B. Maybe B is fair. I feel like Jungle's a pretty good comp. Is Jungle really going to be that good? It's probably not an S tier comp, but I could see Feral being pretty good. Maybe somewhere around where Enhancement Shaman is. Fire Mage, this spec was an absolute monster upon release of the patch 10.1.5, but then got some really big nerfs to it. Now, you're also getting a lot of extra mobility. I think your Blink is getting a shorter cooldown now with new talents. Your sustain damage is getting buffed with Glass Cannon. That could be absolutely gnarly. I think defensively is the main problem for Fire Mage. So I want to say like A or S. If it's A tier, I think it's probably the best A tier specialization. I think it's going to be a monster with Glass Cannon. I think it's going to be really good. Frost Death Knight, this one's really hard to say if you're going to be good or not, man. Unholy DK, I'm way more confident with it being improved and being more solid, but with the readjustments to your burst cooldowns getting nerfed and how they went about your sustain damage, I'm not sold on Frost DK. I think Frost DK is a really big risk. Because you're 100% reliant on your cooldowns right now, and they neutered that, and with the way they compensated you, either means you're going to be a monster or I think you're terrible. So this is like a super high risk pick. I think it's more likely not to work out with the current changes that are coming through. So I'm ranking it a little bit lower. Frost Mage, on the other hand, is a beast. It's doing a lot of damage. It's doing a lot of damage in the patch. You're getting a lot of damage buffs. With the removal of Rune of Power, it means you're less cooldown dependent. I also think Icy Veins is a lower cooldown now. I believe it's down to 2 minutes. So Frost Mage, I'm pretty tempted to put on A tier, maybe like somewhere around where Destro is. I think Frost Mage is going to be absolutely monstrous here. Fury Warrior. Now, Fury Warrior is interesting because I don't think you're getting any changes. I think you're literally staying the same. But in a Death Knight meta, you really want to be a Fury Warrior because you're going to just cut down their healing. You're going to run them over. Death Knights really hate kind of warrior physical classes. And yeah, I don't think you're getting any changes specifically linked to Fury. So you're probably still going to end up in it. Yeah, you're going to still end up in the same position, probably like an A tier melee, maybe the best of the A tier or close to it. Really solid pick overall. Holy Paladin, this thing is going to be S tier. This thing is absolutely out of this world. They're bringing back old talents like Tears Deliverance. It's going to be a huge healing over time effect. They're buffing your direct healing spells by like 40 and 25%, taking a lot of healing out of your cooldowns and more spacing into other spells. Glimmer of Life is just doing so much healing at the moment. You do a truck ton of damage. You can generate Holy Power more easily by doing damage. I think that Holy Paladin is going to be absolutely disgusting when it comes to PvP on 10.1.5 with what I've seen and the tuning and from what I've been reading from feedback from other players. Yeah, I think it's going to be great. Holy Priest, I also think is going to be amazing. I think that this could be an S tier healer. They're buffing its damage by quite a lot, I believe. And it's going to be absolutely crazy as a result with how much damage it's actually getting. Now, I think the changes for Holy Priest, were they down here? They're also changing Divine Hymn. I don't know how much this will have in terms of impact for Holy Priest. Probably not very much. Maybe it changed the game entirely. Maybe it's like a huge Tranquility raid heal type of deal that's like, oh, we can't die while you channel it. You can use it in your Spirit of Redemption or something. But the damage output that you can do is Holy, which I think is coming through with the class changes because of PvE, which is also going to be coming over into PvP, is putting you into a great spot. So 10% damage buff on everything here. Changes in talents for talents that added damage, increasing some more like efficiency with your talent tree. I think Holy could be absolutely insane. It's kind of like a Holy patch. Holy Priest is looking really good. Demon Hunter, I don't believe you're getting any buffs. I want to double check this for Demon Hunter because maybe you are getting buffs. Demon Hunter isn't one that like jumped out to me, and maybe I'm scrolling to the wrong place into this, but I believe Demon Hunter is near the top. So Demon Hunter, yeah, I don't think you're getting any changes when it comes to PvP or when it comes to PvE. So I wouldn't really expect to be kind of like stupendous. You're probably going to feel, pretty solid overall, but maybe not super fantastic unless I find some changes here last second in the PvP changes, but I'm like 99% sure. I just want to make sure because there's so many talent trees. Yeah, there's nothing here for Demon Hunter specifically. So you're probably going to end up in the same spot. Subtlety Rogue is still really strong, which is going to limit you, obviously. But Death Knights being better and your synergy with Death Knights might give you more viable options. You're probably going to feel more like an A tier in a decent spot. And honestly, the fact that so many specializations are coming in on an A tier, which is maybe like ideal location for a spec, is showing like how wide the variety is going to be for specs. Marksmanship Hunter, you're not seeing a lot. I don't think you're seeing anything for this patch, and you're still kind of weak defensively. Now, you absolutely one-shot people. But if people know how to deal with that one-shot, you're gonna struggle. People can line of sight you. Putting you on B tier, I think, just because of the defense, and if you know how to play around this spec, it's really easy to counter. But if you don't, it's an absolute monster. Kind of just like a noob stomper spec. Balanced Druid, I'm still expecting this to be S tier. Balanced Druid is receiving some changes to his talent trees. Overall, its damage is probably going to end up being about the same place. The fact that High Winds isn't getting targeted, still going to be a massive damage reduction and healing reduction when you get it on healers. Cyclone's still really powerful. I think that Boomkin will still be a really good specialization overall for PvP. Mistweaver Monk, I'm not expecting a lot. Again, Mistweaver is not one that stood out to me. I just want to like double check this and scroll through and just make sure, but I'm pretty sure Mistweaver had nothing that was like standing out to me. Now, maybe I'm going to bite my tongue here on this one because Mistweaver could have some actually insane thing coming forward. But this is Brewmaster. Mistweaver does not apply in PvP. Some changes to Ancient Teachings, a couple of nerfs to Fist Weaving. You're probably still going to end up in about the same spot. I want to say you're probably like an A tier healer. Maybe better than Disc because your mana, I think, is better. You're going to still be in a really solid position. Outlaw Rogue, you're getting a 9% damage buff. Probably still B tier. Probably still B tier. I'm not sure where your damage would honestly need to be. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that. 10% is decent. Maybe you squeeze into the A tier with that, but I'd say that's like a low roll gamble. I think Marksman's better than Arcane. I'm going to organize this a little bit towards the end in terms of like what's the best of the tier. Preservation Evoker, I think this healer's probably still S tier. There's a lot of S tier healers, dude. This thing does so much damage, just absolutely crazy. It's going to pair really well with Death Knights, gripping people together, deep breathing them, adding them AoE damage. I could see it being really good in this patch, and likely a strong contestant and contender against even Holy Paladin. Resto Druid, you're getting some damage buffs, but they're nerfing Nature's Vigil. You're going to lose the pad damage, but your direct damage spells are getting 25% damage buff. So your Star Surges, might be able to contribute a lot for a kill. Probably going to be feeling like an A tier healer. And Solo Shuffle, probably still going to run into mana problems. Really important to go after the right stats with Resto Druid, like Haste and Mastery. My Druid isn't right now. It's really tough to do anything without Haste and Mastery. If you got too much Verse, it's just completely unnecessary. But I think it's still going to be a pretty solid healer overall. Retribution Paladin, I think that this is still an A tier pick. Probably better than Enhancement, somewhere around Enhancement and Warrior. But Frost Mage, again, Ret Paladin's one of those classes where you're either hard countered or you're kind of dominating. But even I've seen in Wizard lobbies, Ret Paladins do well in solo shuffle. Yeah, I think you're still in a great spot. And honestly, Ret Paladin's one of the specs that are really good at killing Holy Paladins if Holy Paladins are good. And they can be great at smashing Death Knights with Warrior Ret. That can be a really good comp for smashing them in PvP. I think you'll feel pretty good in this patch. Restoration Shaman. How am I feeling about Restoration Shaman? They're buffing your Healing Rain and your Acid Rain, I think. So like your Healing Rain damage. With Death Knights, grouping people together, maybe that's a thing. I think you'll still feel pretty solid. You're probably still like an A tier healer. Honestly, the healer balance is getting really close and really good moving forward with this patch. So it's more like a playstyle thing, and healers have certain niches that they're slightly better in than other healers. But the healer balance is actually getting really good when it comes to PvP. Shadow. I'm expecting this spec still to be S tier. It's still really tanky. We haven't seen any nerfs targeted their survivability. I still think you're going to be in a really good spot in terms of overall pressure, carrying over from the last patch. Subtlety Rogue, they're basically unnerfing the nerf they just did because you're getting a 4% damage buff that's staying in the game. So I think Subtlety Rogue is probably still going to be S tier. Might struggle again with things like Demonology Warlock and the extra crowd control that they have. Might have a tougher time with Holy Paladins being in the meta, having lots of buffs and bubbles to stop all your goes, and they can get aggressive on your team. I wonder if Augmentation Evoker Sub Rogue ends up being any good, and like which comps Augmentation Evoker is going to end up being paired with, which damage amplifiers is it best paired with. I'm thinking maybe even a Death Knight. We saw Devastation Death Knight doing really well. Maybe now it's just Death Knights play with Augmentation instead. We'll kind of have to wait and see with that one. Survival Hunter, I don't think you're getting anything. I'm like 99% sure as survival you're not getting anything. Defensively, again, you're a weaker melee for sure. Overall damage, overall sustained damage in a decent spot. I don't know if Hunter comps are really going to be super meta though, especially with Paladins and their sacrifice damage, and the way they can redirect things. Again, if you're the best survival hunter in the game, I'm sure that you can make it work. Am I really about to say that you're the same as an outlaw? I don't think so. I think you're probably like on the bottom of the A tier, maybe the B tier. Is that fair? The best of the B tier? The best of the B tier? Somewhere in there. Unholy DK, and this is another spec. I think this is going up to the S tier. Unholy DK is just getting so much damage. It's going to do so much damage. And if Holy Paladin healing throughput is high on healers, it can keep it alive and keep it going. Like, it's going to do so much. It's going to be a wrecking ball. It's going to absolutely dominate. It's getting so many buffs. I mean, we can look at the buffs if you want to confirm this, but you're getting Virulent Plague damage buffs. You're getting Festering Wound damage by 250%. That's way more sustained damage. Death Coil damage, 90% increase. Scourge Strike, 30%. Clawing Shadows, 30%. I really expect like the damage on this class is going to feel a lot better. You're going to feel really powerful. Unholy Death Knight in this patch is going to be really good. Windwalker Monk, you're getting some surprising defensive buffs that came through that I think are going to make you feel really strong with these cooldowns. They're buffing the amount that Touch of Karma absorbs, but reducing the reflected damage. They're buffing the amount that Dampen Harm reduces by 10%. They're buffing Fortifying Brew by 10%. So honestly, putting you into a lot better spot. I think I feel pretty comfortable like throwing you like mid-mix of the A tier possibly for Windwalker Monk in this position. So what are we looking at here on this tier list? We got Holy Paladin. I'm putting that as the best healer. Maybe Preservation is better than Holy Priest. Pretty close. Augmentation, is it the best ranged? I don't know if I'd say it's the... Maybe it is with the current tuning. That's probably a fair position to put it. The casters are really close. Subtlety Rogue on Holy DK, again, really close. Melee are all coming within leagues of each other. I think this is the right order for them. Fury, Arms, Ret, Enhanced, Windwalker, Demon Hunter, and Feral. Fire Mage, best A tier. Maybe Ailey is better than BM. And then Frost is a gamble. Frost is more of a gamble. Honestly, I'll say this is like a high risk pick. I think it could end up being really good with the damage buffs it's getting, but high risk pick again. This one's risky. Mistweaver, Disc, Resto Druid, Resto Shaman. I think they're going to feel weaker than these three, given the changes that are coming through for them. Mostly the mana limitations on these two, and then the throughput limitation on Resto Shaman, and then Mistweaver's susceptibility to crowd control. Affliction, while it's getting damage buffs, is still lacking something in the kit overall compared to everything else. Marksman's lacking defense. Arcane is losing a lot of burst, which was the main edge for you. Survival, I'm putting down here mostly for defense. Outlaw, I'm putting down here mostly for damage. Maybe the 9% will be enough. Assassination, low damage, low defense. Devastation, really low defense. You just don't have the same utility as Augmentation. I think you're being replaced. And Frost DK, this is just a risk. Like, this is just a risk pick. Maybe it's crazy insane. with the way that they've retuned it, but I think Unholy stands a much better chance. I think this would be a really big risk to go for Frost DK on this patch. And those are kind of my overall thoughts here. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, what your experiences are. Again, this is a prediction for 10.1.5, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. I hope this gets you excited to check out maybe what your specializations has got moving forward, or maybe a new one for the patch to give a try. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. If you want to stay up to date with videos like this, make sure to smash the subscribe button, and your support is greatly appreciated. I will see you in the next video.